Hello. Hey, welcome back to another YouTube video on Databricks, and this is one of the features I've been excited about to talk about in my YouTube channel. And this feature I'll be talking about today is Databricks for each functionality in the Databricks workflows. They have a very nice documentation here. If you go on the Databricks website, you'll see some good documentation on how to use it. So it's pretty much a functionality that we, the data engineers, use quite a lot, especially when you are orchestrating different jobs or different tasks, and you want to run them in parallel or iterate over them. Just similar to your for loop, but the difference here is that you can run each iteration concurrently, which means like in parallel. This is super effective, especially when you're orchestrating a large scale job that doesn't have dependencies, and you can just run the notebooks in parallel, and that will optimize your pipeline. So without wasting much time, let's get into it. Let's get into the basics. So here I have the very simplest case that you could create. So first, you could I created one already, but let's go over that. So you go to create a new task. So let's actually create one actually right now without leveraging. So if I go create task, okay, it says simple for each test. So here I will, one of the things you have to do is to definitely create pick a type. So here I would actually pick the for each type here, and for my array of inputs, let's say I'm trying to run this for each of the tables in my configuration file. I can I can do something like this. Put an array, like you can see, they already gave you a hint here. So table one, table two, and let's say I can run it in parallel, like you can see here, run two in parallel. Now this is for each setup is done. I can now decide to put an inner activity I want to loop through. So here is the inner activity. Let us review that. So now I can pick a notebook. So I already have a notebook here, like for each test. And I'll show you this notebook, what it's doing. I already have a cluster. So this notebook is actually doing something very simple. It is basically taking an input parameter and just saying hello world and printing that input parameter. So let me actually let's actually run this. So one of the things you need to do is to add a parameter here to the tags, and you could add the parameter. My key is the input parameter, and the value is, you can click this to help you. inputs, right? So I can now say create, and now I am good to go. So now all I have to do is rename this to simple for each example, and I can run it. And what you should expect is the first notebook, it is gonna say hello world table one, then hello world table. The next iteration will say hello world table two. So when I do the run, I can see they are running in parallel because I set it concurrently. If you run, if you want it to run in sequence, you can remove that concurrent setting and leave it to the default. It's gonna run one by one. So let's look at what it did. You can see say hello table two. And here you can see that it's picking the input parameter two. Another cool thing that I noticed is from the from this tab, you can actually see the input value for each of the uh, iteration or each session it generates. You could see the input value it passes into that. So this is a very simple example. It works, right? Now let's look at another example that is actually something a bit more, you could say a bit more complex. So this example involves where you imagine you wanna pass some a tax. You can see, let's say I have a complex JSON file and I read it in. I want to pass the arrays to this for each. So let's say, let me open this pass JSON notebook for you. So this is my initial notebook. Let's say I have this JSON string that I want to pass in this table list into the for each, but this is the original JSON file. So what I need to do is to obviously pass the JSON, get the table list portion of the JSON, which is this array, and then I have to use this uh, job utils tax values to set the output parameter of this notebook to this table array, as you can see here. Let me run it so you know it's working. So I'm passing the output, right, of this notebook, this notebook tax. The output value is gonna store this table one and table two array. So I'm storing it here. And this now becomes the input to my um, for each workflow. So that is what I have here. So this pass JSON will run. As you can see here, you're just gonna just run this task. Then this for each has a dependency. So when I click it, here is the key here is to specify these tax values. And when you click this, it does sort of help you sometimes, you know. So the syntax is, let me remove this, sorry. So the syntax to, it's actually on the documentation as well. The syntax is to, it's right here. Yeah, it's right here in the documentation, right? is basically you have the tax, it's a keyword, the name of the preceding workflow tax. You put the values keyword and then the key name of the preceding uh, tax values. So again, you can look at documentation, but in this case, yes, tax dot pass. This is the name of the tax dot values dot the key name is output array. As you can see here, output array is the key name. So that is how to set this up. And inside here again, I have the same for each test notebook that I'm testing. So I can just run this. In this case, I'll run it. You can view run. So you can see it's running this one. It's passing the JSON and it's done passing the JSON. You can see here tax values. You see it's coming appropriately. And when we go back to the for each test, we can see that this time I'm making it run one by one. So you run the first one, the first iteration, it has table one, hello world, table one. The second iteration will run hello world, table two. So that's what, there you have it. And that's how it works for each tax. When you have to maybe do some pre-processing, get the array, I think the actual input array that you want to pass to your for each tax. So I think that looks good to me. And that's one of the main things, use cases that I see. Finally, I also wanted to show you a use case where, let's say, you have a more complex JSON file. For example, you you have something like this. Let's see in the notepad. Let's see if you can see this in the notepad. Um, so let's say you have a complex JSON like this, where you have a directory A, table list A, table list. So this sort of structure, if you wanted to iterate over, let's say, the directory or the table list, you can also do that. You can put this in here. That's what I put in here. And then inside, the only thing you have to change is inside the inactivity. You have to now say input dot the key name, the table list. So this way, when it runs, you will see. Let's run it again. I'm still using the same path for each tax, for each test notebook that just says hello world. So when I run this, you will see that it iterates over the dictionary or the array of values that I passed in. So as you can see here, this hello world, if you scroll down, you see it passes in the table one, table two into this array for iteration 0. Then we'll see iteration 1 Now, yeah. So there you have it. And here, when you look at this, you could see the input values, what it's doing. Say directory A, table list one. So this is how it's gonna do it now. I've had a question like, if I wanted to specifically uh, pass the JSON and passing only this table one and table two, is it possible? I didn't have a lock. I couldn't figure it out. Like, if, for example, I had this input JSON, let me show you. Let's say, let's say I have an input JSON like this, and I wanted to just pass only this table list so that it can iterate table one and table two. Let's see if it's possible. So you can see here, let me change this, changing this. I save it. Will it iterate table one and table two? Unfortunately, it won't, because I tested it and I'm not sure how to modify this place to make it like iterate over the individual items in the array. So when I run it, you see what I'm saying. Because I run it here, you'll see that again it's taking in the whole table list. It's not figuring out that okay, it should be just table one. It's taking both in the same uh, batch. As you can see here, it's printing table one, table two. So, but like I said, if you have this scenario, there is no need to break your head trying to figure it out. You can always use a preceding notebook or preceding tags that strips, passes out the JSON and leaves only this array portion that can be passed into your for each outer loop, like passing only the array portion into this for each outer loop. It will make your life much easier. Finally, um, that's all I have for this for each. So what are my overall takes? I think yes, it's a good thing that they have Databricks has eventually, uh, you could say, GA this. It made it available, this feature, because that's something we've been missing in our orchestration with workflows. However, there are some drawbacks. So one of the biggest drawbacks, as you might notice, is you are limited to just one activity inside this for each task. So most times in the real world, I probably want to have multiple tags here. Like I want to have I run one notebook, then connect it to another notebook and all that. So unfortunately, um, you cannot orchestrate that in this manner. Unfortunately, yes, you cannot do that. So you are pretty much stuck using using this only having just one notebook. Obviously, are there workarounds? Yes, you can. Within one notebook, you can have the run command where you can have one notebook and you run multiple notebooks within that in sequence. Then you can use that to call the calling in your for each. But yeah, it's something that is not really what we want to do. Alternatively, you can also have you can see like within the for each, you can make this a instead of a notebook, you can make it a run job, right? And with the run job, you can run any existing job you want. However, the challenge with this is when you run a job, right? You probably will, if you're using a job cluster, you're gonna be spinning up another job cluster for each of those iterations. For each iteration, you'll be spinning up a new job cluster for that job. So that's actually not ideal because the whole intention is I wanted to use the same job cluster that I was using for the for each to run all the things that are within this my for each. So this is the downside of using I wouldn't do this run job method. I'd rather create a notebook and just sequence the run commands, like call it an orchestration notebook where I can just uh, run the individual notebooks and push it into the run it from this for each task. And the other downside, like I would say, is I personally don't like that I when I'm specifying this input JSON, I didn't have much flexibility in getting the only this portion, this inner array portion and iterating over it. I didn't like that. I mean maybe someone could figure it out, but it's not as intuitive. It's not as intuitive when you look compared to data factory, right? Because this when I when you're naming this trying to pass this input JSON, you kind of want it to be super intuitive for you. So it's not as intuitive to get it to iterate over this table one and table two individually. So that is my two main concerns. Apart from that, I think it is pretty decent. It's pretty good feature that we need right now, not right now. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Please drop likes, comments, and questions. I offer a data engineering with Azure Data Engineering with Databricks Bootcamp, and it's coming up in September 24th. So please sign up. Let me know if you're interested. We'll go over everything around data engineering, especially using Databricks, Data Factory, and do some real world projects. All right, bye.